So those lessons that you're talking about, what can you do? You mentioned in my circle of influence, and then, how do I get better after this? How would you say that those two highlights, if you want, have showed up later on in your development and your next career? Because I know that you mentioned about two big careers in your journey.
Yeah. So they have showed up every single rotation I've done. It's interesting when you look back. Yes, after spending a total of about 11 years in television news for some personal reasons, my husband and I chose to make a career shift. And I ended up starting to work in organizational development for a very large consumer products goods company. And I had a number of rotations through there, but I was always more comfortable in the training, organizational development, coaching, large project facilitation. And I had an opportunity, probably after I'd been there about 15 years, so I had a lot of success. I was asked to lead strategic planning for the organization. It was going to be a new process. And we were working with some outside consultants. And so I was being asked to do something, and I was excited about it. But I don't have an MBA. And I really don't have, or I didn't have, so I want to be careful here, a strong finance background. I'd really run from finances. And so all these images in my head came up about all the things I didn't have to do this job. And I started to go down a path of, okay, I need to get better. I need to take finance classes, or I need to get a night MBA. I really went down that I was not qualified for it. And that was in my head, right? Because the job's moving forward, but I'd lost a lot of my energy and confidence. And one day it hit me, right? I try and do a lot of reflection, morning journaling, that if I get curious, because I've used this about why me here? Why am I being chosen? And showing up with, I'm willing to get better. If you say, I need finance classes, I am always willing to get better. But the why now? What are you seeing? And the answer that came back was, we have a huge and talented finance department. We have a robust MBA recruiting program, ironically, that I used to run when I was in recruiting. And I think that's what got in my head. If that's what we wanted, there's lots of people who can do that. What we want is someone to help navigate the organization, lead a project through the various interests within the organization and facilitation skills. But if I hadn't really asked, I would have spent all of my time trying to be a finance person because I was so afraid of being seen lacking and being like discovered after having been there 15 years as faulty, right? So that unfortunately can stick with you, that little bit of doubt. And that's where the curiosity coupled with what I'll call one of the core values at my last employer was humility, just the openness to say, I don't have these skills. Do I need to get them? Not, I will never learn them, not like, I can't, but what are we talking about here? Because we both want the same thing, right? You and your organization and you and a future employer are always aligned in that the organization and you want success. No one hires for failure. No one seeks failure, but I think we forget that in getting so armored up. So that agency, if you will, the curiosity, the what's in my influence, which is to ask those questions, served me really well. And it really led to several other great assignments, including an expat assignment that if I hadn't been willing to take a job where I was scared of failure again, because it felt like, oh my gosh, what's about to happen? Is this all those years ago when I was moved into a position? You get triggers and you realize, no, I'm a different person. I'm a stronger person. I'm not that same 24 and 25-year-old.
You mentioned something that is wonderful, Susan, is that quite often, and I see that and I hear that quite often with women who I work with, is very often when we are, in a specific role, say, well, I don't have, or we question ourselves, right?
Yeah.
We question, or we guessing ourselves, double guessing, and saying, sometimes we don't feel qualified, we don't have the right skills and all of that. But because we tend to look at this more from that point of view, versus if somebody asks you to take that role, is obviously,
yes,
they believe you can succeed in that role.
yes.
Right. But we don't remind ourselves of this enough. And that, I think, what you're sharing here is such a great reinforcement that there's a reason why you're here, that you have talents that others don't have, and that's why you've been asked.